Moderator Sumit Ray, as he leads his panel onto the stage, Suzanne Kamata, Phing, Monideepa Sahu, and Zafar Anjum to discuss the best Asian short stories.
Yeah, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this wonderful, wonderful afternoon. Nice, bright, sunny Kolkata, to a very, very interesting session, which is the best Asian short stories. Short story writers write short pieces of prose fiction that generally focus on a single theme, simple plots, and a few characters. There is considerable debate surrounding what should be an appropriate word limit for a piece of fiction to be considered a short story. Sometimes it's generally considered to be between 1,000 to about 20,000 words. But Edgar Allan Poe, one of the famous short story writers, had said that the earliest writers of short stories defined a short story as a short piece of fiction that can be read in one sitting. So therefore, we are going to be discussing short stories, and more specifically, the best Asian short stories. Now, before I came up and we were discussing with my panelists, I'd done a quick research on Google, trying to see which are the world's best short stories, or the famous short stories, or the must-read short stories. And I tried to table the top 10 such short stories across the world. And guess what? That little research revealed that the world's best, well-read, most loved, the classic short stories were all written when? Any idea? By the latter part of the 19th century. And surprisingly, that list did not contain a single Asian writer. So from Charles Dickens, Oscar Wilde, H.G. Wells, O. Henry, Washington Irving, Kate Chopin, R.L. Stevenson, Charlotte Gilman, Edgar Allan Poe, Arthur Conan Doyle's famous short stories like The Signalman, Happy Prince, Magic Shop, Gift of the Magi, Rip Van Winkle, Desiree's Baby, The Body Snatcher, The Yellow Wallpaper, The Telltale Heart, and B-24 were regarded as some of the best short stories. So these are things that we're going to be deliberating this afternoon as to why Asia did not feature then and what makes it so unique. And please put your hands together because I have a very, very commendable panel today. 4 very, very accomplished panelists. And the only gentleman on my panel needs the first introduction. Zafar Anjum, who's a writer, publisher, and filmmaker who lives and works in Singapore. As a journalist, Zafar worked as the online editor at Executive Networks Media Singapore, leading the editorial team online for enterprise IT publications such as Computer World Singapore and Computer World Malaysia. He's the author of Kafka in Ayodhya and Other Stories, Startup Capitals, Discovering the Global Hotspots of Innovation. One of his famous works is Iqbal, The Life of a Poet, Philosopher and Politician, and the best-selling business book, The Resurgence of Satyam. He's also dabbled in a collection of short stories, The Singapore Decalogue, Episodes in the Life of a Foreign Talent, and a collection of essays on Kafka and Orwell on China. Zafar also makes short films and documentaries and has so far scripted 2 feature films. Interestingly, he is also the founder-editor of Kitab, the publishing house which has published this compilation of the best Asian short stories, as well as which is dedicated to promoting Asian writing in English. So, welcome, Zafar. I have here with me Monideepa Sahu, lady extreme right. She's a former banker, tired of managing money for others, and somewhere she has also said not making much for herself. She quit and took to writing. Her work includes a fantasy adventure novel for younger readers, Riddle of the Seventh Stone, The Renaissance Man on Rabindranath Tagore, and a collection of short stories for adults entitled Going Home in the Rain. Her other short fiction work includes The Rainbow Feast, New Asian Stories, Behind the Shadows, which are stories from Africa and Asia, The Killer App and Other Paranormal Stories, Music of the Stars and Other Love Stories, Bad Moon Rising, The Puffin Book of Mystery Stories, and many, many others. She currently contributes to Deccan Herald and some other mainstream publications in India, and is also the fiction editor with Kitab International. Lady sitting right next to Zafar is Phing, who's born in Malaysia to parents in Butterworth, Penang. She's a full-time writer who has lived in the UK, China, Italy, Singapore, and Malaysia. She graduated with a BA Honours in Politics and International Relations from the University of Manchester. For the last 5 years before returning to her hometown in Penang in 2016, she worked in Singapore as the editor-in-chief of Asian Geographic magazine. As a fiction writer, her poems and short stories have been published in the US, Canada, Malaysia, Singapore, Philippines, and Australia. Her story, Oil and Water, was a finalist at the Mont Blanc Esquire Fiction Project 2015, while Curry of the Day won second prize at the Shakespeare Lives writing competition in Singapore. She enjoys writing modern literary fiction set in Malaysia and Singapore with a twist of grit and urban legend. Welcome. And finally, my fourth panelist this afternoon is Suzanne Kamata, who was born and raised in Grand Haven, Michigan. And she's from Lexington, South Carolina, but now lives in Tokushima in Japan with her husband and 2 children. Her short stories, essays, and articles and book reviews have appeared in over 100 publications, including Real Simple, Brain, Child, Cicada, and the Japan Times. Her work has been nominated for the Pushcart Prize 5 times and received a special mention in 2006. She's also a 2-time winner of the All Nippon Airways Wingspan Fiction Contest and winner of the Paris Book Festival and winner of the SCBWI Magazine Merit Award. So ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for Zafar, Suzanne, Juan, and Monideepa. So before we get into Asian short stories, I think the question to all 4 of you is, short stories, if I read the number of novels that are being published and short stories that are being published today, I find that novels far outnumber perhaps short stories. So what makes short story writing so challenging, how difficult it is, and how does one get motivated to write? So we can start with anywhere. Should we start with you, Zafar? Yeah.
Yeah, okay. First of all, thank you very much for that generous introduction. And we are grateful to be here in front of all of you. Thank you for your time as well. Short stories are my first love, and I believe that all my 3 co-panelists have shared the same love, and some of them are trying to write novels as well. But the question that why there is this, less number of short story collections coming out compared to novels, right? And this is not just true for the Indian market, but I have seen this internationally. And what I have learned is the main reason is ROI, So publishers go by ROI, return on investment, and their business trade stats show that short story collections do less well than novels, and that's why they don't support short story collections that much. And I have experienced this firsthand because most of my other books have been published by like Penguin Random House, but when you talk about short stories, especially literary short stories, they're a bit cautious about that. I'm sure my other co-panelists will share their experiences about this thing. The other reason, from a reader's point of view, right? A lot of people like to stay with the book, stay with the character or a set of characters for a longer time. So when they buy a book, they prefer to read novels. I hope that this will change, and we are trying to make efforts in doing that. But let's see. That's my experience.
As a writer, what's so challenging and what makes it so interesting or difficult to write short stories?
I think writing concisely is a skill, to be able to pack so many things into a short sentence. Because sometimes you can say something in 10 words, but you can also describe it in 3 words. and that's even more powerful. And I think that is a skill that a lot of writers will pick up, will learn to pick up. And yeah, I just really love that you're able to, in one sitting, finish a story and have a vivid idea of what this world is and what the characters are. Yeah.
Wonderful. In fact, Jeffrey Archer's latest collection of short stories, The Telltale, starts off with a short story he was challenged to write within 100 words. It's a very, very brilliant story. And he, I think, first did it in 102 words, and then he went to 98 words, and then finally did it in exactly 100 words. So I'm sure that's really a skill. Suzanne, what's your take?
I think if you're writing a short story, you have less room for error. People can see your mistakes or things that don't ring true. But if you're reading a novel or if you're writing a novel, the story can go off in many directions. It can sprawl a bit, and people tolerate that. But a story has to be very crisp and clear and stay on track, which is difficult.
And Monideepa, your take?
Well, I agree with my co-panelists. And one thing is, I enjoy reading short stories because it's not always that I have time to read a 500-page novel or a 300-page novel. And a short story is such, if it's 10, 20 pages, I can read it at one sitting and I get the same experience, I feel. You know, the sense of fulfillment, the sense of understanding, getting some insight of life or whatever it is the storyteller is telling. So I like that too, just as I like novels. And I hope some other readers agree with me on that. And a short story is much more challenging to write because, as Suzanne said, there's no room for error. You make a mistake, readers will immediately catch it. As a writer, I will catch it first. So I can't go on for another 30 pages to rectify the error. I have to do it in 15 pages. So it is a lot more effort that way. And maybe I think it's less popular because compared to the effort put in, you get a much smaller thing. It's not meaty enough for the publisher. As a publisher, you can tell that.
And therefore, the next question is, Zafar, how do we make short story writing more popular, both in terms of publishing and both in terms of getting readership? What are the kind of efforts that you think we could?
Yeah, I think, and I hope, and when I'm saying this, I hope that today we talk about attention spans going down, right? The newer generation, even myself, I feel that I am more attuned to now, compared to last 10 years, probably more attuned to reading short stories, consuming short films, than having the patience to enjoy a work of longer narrative. So in that sense, probably, stirred by this thing, you see in China, in a lot of other places, people are consuming content through mobile devices, through Kindle. And I've seen this especially in the case of China, where this thing has bloomed. There are other reasons as well. But the younger generation is consuming more stuff in a shorter, in a serialized form, in a shorter form than seen earlier. So that is one. The second thing is there is this trend of, now this is coming as an impetus, as a motivation of the market, right? There's this trend of making of short films, series for OTT platforms or for streaming platforms. And they are now looking for these kind of content. So, driven by this, probably more writers and more publishers will be experimenting with the shorter form of fiction writing and giving it more space and more budget than earlier. Like I said, it's my hope. And Kitab, as a publishing company which I run from Singapore, is definitely trying to do that. And not only we have been trying to bring more new voices, give chance to more new voices in this format than what I've seen others doing. So hopefully mainstream publishers also come on board and support it. And the book we are going to talk about is an effort in that direction.
And quickly, Monideepa, since you've edited this book, how do you inculcate short story writing with the younger generation? One is the consumption, which he talked about, because the world is moving to shorter and shorter time spans. Short films, short videos, everything's becoming smaller. You want to watch something quickly on Facebook or on... But how do you get people to write? I mean, people are doing a lot of short films. How do you do that with young authors, aspiring authors?
Any thoughts on that?
I'd say that a lot of young authors, aspiring authors, they also like these as exercises. You know, maybe it's a warm-up exercise also, that when you have an idea for a novel, you also like to, experiment with the characters, and some of them become very good short stories, standalone in their own right. They're gripping, they're everything, and you see what works and what doesn't. So rather than, bite off the entire tree, you'd go for a fruit first. So the fruit is a short story, rather than, grab it all at once.
Grab it all at once.
So it works.
So I think we'll take a short, quick break because I think we have a ceremony now. Because Zafar tells me that he wants to, in front of this wonderful August audience, inaugurate this publication, the best Asian short stories. And may I request Zafar then to do the honors, because I can
let's
see
all do that, and let's unveil the book.
Ladies and gentlemen, a big hand. We are unveiling the... Thank you.
We will come to the question answer session after the end of the session, please, sir. So we will come to your question as soon as the sir, you're interrupting the session, so please let the session continue. There is a question answer session for the audience, and we will definitely take your questions. We will. Please ask your question at the time of the question answer session, sir. Thank you very much. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. This is a very interesting compilation, and I was trying to go through the short stories and put together what this book is all about. But journalist Mithali Chakraborty has done a review which I think very shortly condenses what this collection is all about. She says, these short stories cover diaspora of Asian cultures, histories, societies in transit, shifting borders and values. They embrace an array of emotions that are universal and touch the heart of the reader. My experience has been of traveling from the backstairs of Singapore's government-subsidized flats to Malaysian sports, to Filipino slums, to Mao's China, to Korea's madly competitive society, to the lonely world of an old Japanese, to a Syrian refugee's boat, and to the shifting borders of India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh, and to the rebellion against restrictions in the conservative Middle East. One feels compelled to pause after each story in this collection as it resonates and lingers to create a distinct impression. Sometimes I have found the experience disturbing and sometimes happy. These 32 stories have one thing in common. They all inculcate compassion, a love for mankind, and a view of a world beyond borders. I think very, very aptly put. So I think the first question, Monideepa, to you, because you've been the editor of this collection. So really, how did this come about? And Zafar, to you, how did Kitab think of doing this?
Okay, so the idea was Zafar's. Okay, and we have been friends for a long time. And I think you'll give credit to the person who started it all. I can leave it to you.
Yes, of course.
Yeah, Zafar.
Yeah, basically the credit goes to, in a way, a gentleman called Francis Ford Coppola of the Godfather and Apocalypse Now fame. And there's a story behind that. Why don't you tell the story, Monideepa?
Okay. Francis Ford Coppola has got a website, and in that he has a Zoetrope Virtual Studios, which is an online workshop for writers from all around the world. And Zafar and I met there in 2002. And I was always warned, in those days, especially when the net was not so popular among every Indian, do not interact with strangers, never trust a stranger on the net, especially men, because I'm a lady. And he's the first friend I made in Zoetrope. I posted a story, he read it, he just critiqued it, which is how it works. And we made friends, which we never would have, because he must have been 24, 25, and I'm some old auntie, we'd never know what to say in real life. So we thank Francis Ford Coppola for this. And that's how we started, how we became on the same page about the short story form, about our own work in progress. We used to keep exchanging notes. And that's where the idea actually started, that we must encourage more writers to write, people like us, who don't know where to turn to, where to get help, and good advice.
Yeah, exactly.
So Zafar, so
yeah.
then how did Kitab, decide to? Yeah.
I'll come to that point. So that was the genesis of, and from that time, we have been loving this form, and we have been trying to learn to write this form, and so of course it requires a lot of reading, a lot of support, and a lot of friends and other writers who can come and critique your work, who can give you their opinion. Especially when you are starting out, you're not sure exactly, where you're going, or does your work have any literary merit to it. So you need friends like Monideepa, who are well-read and who can give the opinion. And I tried to do the same with her work, and that kept us going. And then there were other writers also, who were part of the same virtual group, and they were also trying to learn to write. And today they are doing some good work. Some of them become very famous writers in America, right? Like Chimamanda. So coming from that, so I always had this desire to foster this love of short stories, and I wanted to support other writers who are facing problems, in getting their short stories published. So we started this platform called Kitab.org. I started in 2005, right after I landed in Singapore, and that was also kind of my way of getting connected with the world around me. And that was the beginning of the internet era, right? This was before Facebook and Twitter and all that. That became popular a little later. But then we started this, and then we started getting in touch with other Asian writers. And later on, I saw a couple of years down the line, other Asian writing websites also cropped up, So there was communities being formed, and I thought the next stage is to take it to the next level, right? On Kitab.org, of course, we publish individual short stories, but how to make the Asian voice reach, larger geographies? Even within Asia, right? We don't know what kind of stories Koreans are writing, or Thais are writing, or Myanmaris are writing, right? So I was very curious about what exactly is happening in those spaces, and why is nobody translating them? And if you look within India, right, a lot of good short stories are being written, I'm sure, in Bengali, in Tamil, other languages, but we are not sure what's happening. And publishers, mainstream publishers, most of them are my friends, I don't want to badmouth them, but they are not taking the kind of risks that they should take. So one of the things, what happened, I used to go to America, and as a technology journalist, I would often travel to San Francisco, Las Vegas, other places, and every time I went to the bookstores at the airports, I would see the best American short stories. And I come back to Singapore, where is my best Asian short story collection? If I want to know about the mindset, about the challenges, problems, societies in our region are facing, how do I get to read about them? I don't have the attention span of reading novels, right? So that was the spark. And then I reached out to Monideepa. I have this idea. Can you help me? Would you like to come on board? And she was very generous. She spent a lot of time in going through the stories. We gave out a call, and then we received hundreds of stories. Maybe Monideepa, why don't you tell us about that?
Yeah, in fact, Monideepa, how did you go about choosing? And then we'll come to Suzanne and Juan. Yeah. How did you select this 32? And how many entries did you get, and on what basis?
Oh, okay.
Because, sorry, the other thing is that Asia being so diverse, because within Asia there are cultures and subcultures, and even within India there's so many cultures and subcultures. So how do you pick the best out of such a diverse diaspora?
Yeah, well, we wanted to encourage new talent. Apart from we have a lot of very well-established writers in our collection. Like from India, we have Shashi Deshpande, who must be the topmost living writer right now, and we have quite a few very big names from all over Asia. But the point was not only to highlight the established names, because there's a lot of talent which has not found a space. We both believe that. So we put out calls on the Kitab site, then posted it in writers' groups, which are online. And we personally told friends, our Zoetrope friends, again they came to the rescue. A friend who lives in Egypt, she put it out among the Arab writers. Then, other friends, we got contributions.
We also had that Asia Pacific Writers and Translations Network.
Yes.
we put it out there as
So
well.
how many entries did you finally get? I mean,
Over 350.
350.
And
And then how did you choose 32?
Okay. At that time, I broke my leg. So I had a lot of time. And I was reading each one. That fell on me. I was the executor. Zafar was the brain behind it. So I had to execute a lot of those stories. I read them myself. And we both had the same idea that, we needed encouragement when we were growing. So we are not going to discourage a single writer who submitted. So every person I used to try to write a polite note saying these are the good things I liked about your story. But I'm really sorry I couldn't take it.
So, let me just probe a little further deeper for our audience. What is it that you looked at in the stories before selecting them? Because, I mean, as he says, from Myanmar to maybe Middle East to Korea to India, it's so diverse. So, while you're saying you selected them, what did you keep in mind? I mean, was it all about humanity? Was it all about what is it? Oh.
First of all, topic, subject, and style. Okay, style and substance. If you have only style, but then it doesn't make sense. Well, I would have to say no to that. In fact, a story by a friend of mine, I had to say no for that. Because I love the style. I know she's a very good writer, but I didn't understand the story properly. It just, she asked me also, why did you reject my story? I said, look, maybe it's my mistake, but I just couldn't get it. I mean, it didn't resonate with me, so it was both of those things.
The substance and style.
Yeah, style and substance. That's it.
Okay, so I'll just pause here and come to Suzanne and Juan. How did you get motivated to write into this or send your article? How did you get to know about it, and how did you choose your story, the one to send?
I had already written the story that I submitted, and when I came across the call for manuscripts on a Facebook group. So I always check Twitter and Facebook groups and various websites to see who's calling for manuscripts. And I had a story related to set in Asia, so I just thought I'd submit it.
And that's interesting, Suzanne, because by birth you're not Asian, and you have adapted or adopted Asia as your home. Do you find when you're writing for something as close as Japan or in Asia, with your upbringing in largely a Western world, conflicts, or does it make it easier, or do you see it from a different perspective? How does it help?
I've lived in Japan now for about 30 years, so I feel, even though I'm still an American citizen, I kind of feel like an American Asian. So I would like to claim Japan as my writing territory. And because I write in English, and very few people in Japan read in English, frankly, I'm writing mostly for an international audience, like for people in America. So while I'm not necessarily explaining Japan to them or to other English readers in other countries, I am bringing my American experience of Japan to the reader.
The American experience of Japan to the reader. Very interesting. And what motivated you to send your entry in, and how did you choose your short story?
I also found this call on Facebook, so they were passing it around and sharing it with our fellow writer friends. I had written this story some time ago, and so it was just sort of sitting in draft format. And I decided to send this story because it felt very Asian, I suppose, very local. And I just thought it would be a good fit because this was Asian short stories. Yeah.
And I'm sure you would have read some of the other short stories in this.
Yes.
So coming from, let's say, Malaysia, how do you resonate with some of the other short stories in the book? Are there similarities? Do you find as Asia there are commonalities in the stories that people are sharing, or is it very vastly diverse?
I think it's quite diverse, but at the same time, there's always what you call being specific in universality, which means even though it's a different culture, but you can always relate to the character or to the place because we all have the same relationships, father, son, mother, daughter, that sort of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, may I add
sure.
something here? So if you look at the stories, right, they basically present a slice of life from all different cultures and countries. And I'll give you an example. Right, the opening story is set in Singapore, right, written by a Chinese Indian Singaporean writer Yomi Balasingham Chow, and that story is about people who deliver food, work in McDonald's and home deliver food using bikes. So it's about a group of 3-4 people who do that for a living, and in that group suddenly, and there are a lot of class and race things in there, in the substructure of the story. If you live there, if you know Singapore, probably you will understand that. Otherwise, it might get lost on you. But suddenly, as a Chinese girl, very smart and good-looking, comes into that group, and how the dynamics change, And then they make a trip to nearby Malaysia, and then have their breakfast there, and the petrol is cheaper. They buy petrol there, etc., etc. So sitting from here, you might have a very glitzy, glamorous image of Singapore, and I can assure you, when you read that story, you would be thinking, wow, I never thought that things like this happen in Singapore. And just a slice of life stories, nothing grand happening there, nothing very mysterious happening there. But then suddenly you see another side of Singapore, right? And you will have the same feeling about different cultures, different countries, whose writers have contributed to this thing. And I wanted to add one more thing here, is this collection is different from the American series, because what Americans do with that series there is that they basically pick and choose stories which have already been published that year in various journals. So they'll go to the New Yorker, they'll go to the whatever Agni, whatever all those journals are there, and their editor will choose. Let's say there are 100 stories, they'll just read them. So basically, they have already passed some kind of a test, because editors of those journals have published them. So the choosing becomes easier, that nobody can challenge you. Hey, how did you choose this? But we took a risk on this, and I totally trusted Monideepa's judgment as a writer and as a critique, and I gave it to her. So that also gives us an opportunity. So for the next book, next edition, right, there will be a different editor, and we'll go by her judgment, and new people will get again more chance to get published in this collection.
Thank you, thank you. In fact, now it's time to kind of delve a little bit into one or two of the short stories, since we have Suzanne and Wan with us. Yours is a very interesting story, because being a woman, your protagonist is a man, Bobby, and a very interesting name, Snake Bridge Temple. So I think, would you like to share with the audience what was the thought, motivation to write the story? A brief synopsis, let's hear it from you, instead of me trying to tell them. And why do you choose this name? And would you like to read one or two passages from it for the benefit of our audience? Thank you.
Okay, so this story is called Snake Bridge Temple, and the reason is because in Penang there is a bridge that connects the island with the mainland, and at night it looks like a snake with the orange lights, and there is a hill. So these are all real settings, and I'm just really inspired by this place that they say is haunted, and like there's a Chinese temple up there, and I personally know like my cousins who love to go there for their prayers, and like they ask for fortunes, they ask for numbers. So yeah, I was just very fascinated by that, and this story is written from my cousin's point of view, fictionalized, of course. Inspired by a real person, but it was my imagination that ran wild with it. So I'll just read a couple of excerpts. Okay. My brothers call me So Zai, but I'm anything but stupid. I'm actually really, really smart. You see, if you want to stay alive in this city, you gotta be like me. Me? I'm not like my brothers. Sure, I'm working in a mechanic shop with my big brother. We're earning our dues and paying mommy's rent. But me, I don't care about school. I only care about making money so I can have a good life. You see, next month I'm going to Bangkok with my friends. I've been saving up for this trip for months. I want to see the world and I want to have a good time. We're going next month because this month is the 7th month and the ghosts are out. There's this hill in Bukit Gambir. People say it's haunted, but it's my favorite place in the whole world. Just down by the slope of this Tua Pek Kong temple, you can see the sea, and at night, the Penang Bridge looks like an orange snake. That bridge, it's my gateway to the world. If you stay on this island for too long, you'll know what I mean. This weekend, when I go to Alostar, I'll have to cross that bridge. It's Ketai season, and there's extra cash to be made everywhere here in the north of Malaysia, as long as there are spirit-believing Taoists. I help the crew set up stage, I do the wiring, I mend the lighting. The girl singer comes on stage wearing knee-high boots and a spaceship suit. Sometimes I get a picture with her backstage, but sometimes the girls are so ugly, I know only the ghosts are looking at them. My dream is to race on that bridge. It's a long, straight road with only a slight curve at the start and at the end. Only the orange lampposts are your guide, the dark oceans on both sides. That bridge is an easy race, but it takes a lot to stay awake on that 13-kilometer stretch. If you fall into the ocean, it would be like going to sleep in a dark abyss. If you crash onto the bridge dividers, it would be like getting pierced with 1,000 metal shards.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Suzanne, over to you. Your story is obviously set in Japan with a lot of women characters and layered characters. So would you like to share with the audience your short story, the genesis, the brief storyline, and then read a couple of lines from it?
Okay. So the genesis came, this was originally supposed to be part of a novel that I've been working on, but which was abandoned. And I started writing like separate short stories about the characters. And I tend to put everything I happen to be preoccupied with at the moment into my fiction. So while I was writing this, I was preoccupied with my relationship with my Japanese mother-in-law. And I married an oldest son, and in Japan that means the oldest son takes care of his parents. And also, I discovered that Marilyn Monroe, the American actress, and her husband, Joe DiMaggio, who was a very famous baseball player, they spent their honeymoon in Japan. So I was intrigued by that. And then finally, I came across, I discovered the robotic seals that were developed for human companionship in Japan. So as you may know, there's like a zero population growth in Japan. And so people, instead of inviting immigrants, they're developing more and more robots for human companionship and other things. So that was kind of the genesis.
What was that toy that became very famous?
It's called Paro.
Paro, yeah.
So in the story, it's like a white, it doesn't appear in what I'm going to read, but it's like a white, fuzzy baby seal.
Baby seal.
Okay, so I'll just read the beginning of the story. It's called Monchan. Nahoko had dropped in on her mother for her weekly visit. As they sat at the kitchen table, drinking green tea and crunching rice crackers, she noticed that Oka-san, which means mother, had framed a photo of Marilyn Monroe and put it on top of the television. How odd, especially since there weren't any photos of grandchildren displayed in the room. But she knew what Marilyn meant to her mother. Nahoko and her family had spent 3 years in Atlanta while her husband June was on overseas assignment. Whenever Nahoko had seen an image of Marilyn Monroe on a t-shirt or a poster or in a magazine over there, she thought of her mother. As a child, she loved to hear Oka-san talk about Marilyn, or Monchan, as she had been known in Japan, once the biggest foreign box office draw in the country. She'd flown into Narita for her honeymoon with the famous baseball player Joe DiMaggio. Nahoko's mother had been a teenager then, and she'd been at the airport with her 3 best friends when the Pan American jet landed. The tarmac was mobbed with reporters and fans, the policemen on security duty just barely holding them back. Nahoko's mother had managed to snap a photo of the honeymooners as they came off the plane. Marilyn beaming in her fur, Joe looking dour at her side. The photo was a tad blurry and a bit faded by now, but Nahoko had always figured it was worth some money. People were auctioning sales receipts and ashtrays left behind by famous people on eBay. If her mother wanted, she could sell it. But the one time her daughter had suggested such a thing, she had scoffed. "This is my best memory," she'd said. "I'd never trade it for money."
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Quick question to both the writers. So, when you think of a short story, what's the kind of writing style? I mean, you did mention that you took it from real life. And so, I do understand often there's this conflict between how much of real life and how much of imagination. How do you balance this and then do it within a number of words? So, are you more into imagination? Do you get inspired by real life? What's your writing style for short stories?
Every short story that I write is different. The process is pretty organic, but usually I have a line, a phrase in my mind that sparks off the story, or sometimes a scene, like an image or a mood, and then it goes on from there. It's like an organic process.
Okay, and Suzanne, what about you?
I tend to write in scenes, for one thing. And like I said, I often take like 3 ideas and blend them together, and then I go for a walk, and then things kind of mix up in my head. It's not very scientific.
So, do you all both face writer's blocks? And when you do, what do you do? Even with a short story?
I need to go away for a while. Just let it sit for 24 hours, go for a walk, just do something else that's different, completely unrelated to writing, and then come back to it.
Do you do that as well?
I do a variety of kinds of writing, so I might just turn to a different kind of writing for a while.
Okay, the last real question to the two of you is, how do you as an author, I mean, when you're even writing a short story novel, judge your own work and say, okay, this is really good? I mean, one is when it gets published, and, the audience appreciation, and, the publisher coming, and every author you hear here on this platform, and everyone says they've been rejected by publishers many times. I think that's a universal truth now. If you're not rejected, you don't become successful. But how do you judge your own work, and how do you say that, okay, this is worth sending?
I'm quite an intuitive kind of writer, so sometimes I feel like, okay, so it's more like a feeling kind of thing, like, okay, I think this is done, this is okay, I can send it out. And getting published is, of course, the best assurance that, okay, you've done something good. But if something's not been published for a while, I would actually send it to for critique. And if 3 or more persons say the same thing, then I'll take that feedback on board and change it. Yeah.
And you?
I usually send a first draft after I'm pretty happy with it. I send a first draft to a couple of trusted writer friends and see what they think. And I would generally wait a few days, maybe a few weeks before sending a story out. Because if you wait, say, a month, you come to it with fresh eyes, and you could read it as if you're reading a stranger's story. So,
Wonderful. Quick questions for you, Zafar and Monideepa, before we open this up to the audience. What's the next project after the Best Asian Short Stories? And there are a lot of young, perhaps writers, potential writers, and old writers here who want to write. Any tips from a publishing house which is online? You're encouraging and you want people to write. You are not biased about well-known and successful writers. You want to encourage young ones to write. So, any tips for them before we open the questions to the audience?
Yeah, of course. Next step is we'll be announcing the call for the 2018 edition soon. So watch out for that. Follow Kitab on Twitter or become a member of the Facebook group so that you will know. And the other thing is within this series we are doing we're also going by different genres. So writing is kind of a big room, big hall. So as writers, you have to understand what exactly you want to do. I mean, initially you tinker around with a lot of things. You can try to write a novel, you can try to do a short story, you can try poetry, etc., etc. After at least 10 years, you will know exactly where your talents lie, where your heart tells you to go, and then you try to excel in that. I mean, that's my approach. It took me 10 years to understand writing, and I'm still trying to understand it. But I have found that short stories work for me. I'm not going to write novels. I'm going to spend my energy and time on short stories, right? As a writer, as a publisher. So find your place in that room and just go for that. And there are other opportunities, other platforms also where you can look out for and send your stuff. and get rejections. I mean, being a writer is like being a startup yourself, right? The foundations are built on failures and rejections. So cherish them and learn, and don't ever become arrogant or overconfident. You're always learning, and you're writing basically to express yourself. Keep that as the big your this thing, guiding light, guiding principle. The other thing, just the little one I want to add is, if you are a genre writer, for example, so we are going to expand this. So right now, one of my very favorite writers, Rajat Chaudhary, who lives in Kolkata, he is editing the volume called The Best Asian Speculative Fiction. So if you write horror stories, if you write sci-fi, send it across to him. You can find the call online. And then we are doing Best Asian Crime Stories, Best Asian Essays, and Travel Writing. All these series will come out. And wherever you find your potential and all that, you can just send your submissions to us through Kitab. Just check out kitab.org.
Just a
You
quick
get all the information. Yeah.
question, Zafar. A lot of young writers, okay, who perhaps don't have much of people around them who they can get critiqued by because they are young and they are aspiring. Does
Right.
Kitab offer this kind of critiquing if they were to send in an entry? Not just that. I mean, to encourage more short story writing.
And as a publishing house, because we are run all by volunteer editors. All the editors that work with us they do it voluntarily, be it the fiction editor or poetry editor and all that. And they try to, if you send your poetry or your fiction, right, the fiction editor will try to give you some kind of feedback. I mean, we can't promise that we'll give feedback on each and every story, but at least those which are worthy of being given some feedback, the editor will give them some feedback. So we try to do that. But more than that, like when we were starting out, we thank our stars that Francis Ford Coppola started that Zoetrope. At least we could get there, post our stories, and we could hear an echo, somewhere. Hey, I like this stuff, or maybe this is where you should improve it. Work on your dialogues, or this paragraph is not working. So there are many platforms like that, especially for those who are starting out. Earlier, like in Balzac's times, right? Balzac had few friends who could give him some opinion. Today we are so individualized, atomized, may not have the right-minded people. You are lucky you are living in a big city, and you can find some other writers who can give their time to you, some inputs on your creations. But never mind. I mean, even if you come from a small towns, you don't have access to big writers, go and find these virtual communities, online communities, and get critiqued and critique others' works, and that's how you learn. There are even online workshops and classes that go on. So today has become so much easier. It all requires your energy and zeal and passion for the form. If you have that, you will go far.
Thank you. And Monideepa, quick words on any advice, tips. Do you encourage them to first start short stories and then try and write novels? What's your, as an editor who's done a phenomenal job?
Okay, I'd say don't be overconfident, because I do see a lot of overconfidence and a sense of entitlement among youngsters. I mean, you've just got one or two blog posts published, and I do come across kids who say, oh, look, I'm a writer. Okay, that's not a writer. You have to go through the grind, improve. Nothing is perfect. In fact, Zafar and I, all four of us will say that. Even our published work, if you read it now, we're going to say, oh God, we could have changed this, this could have improved. There's no end to it. So do not just write maybe 10 paragraphs and think you're perfect. That's a terrible mistake if you're making it. And the second thing is, you cannot have a sense of entitlement that somebody will just, go on critiquing your work and giving you advice for nothing. Offer the friend something in return. Critique that person's work too and offer your suggestions. That's how it works best, as a mutual exchange. And that's how Zafar and I work together.
Yeah, and if I may add, you have to be your worst critic.
Yeah.
Yeah, don't look at your stuff with the rose-tinted glasses. Don't be so kind to yourself. And if you must, I was given the suggestion by somebody that you must have one writer, who is your most favorite writer, and read all his works, A to Z, anything he has written. Read that, and that should become your inspiration. And so follow that. And when you write your own story, try to see, does it measure up to that standard? Is it anywhere there? Of course, it will not measure up, but to the best that you can. And one way I find out if my story is complete is, Like I try to remove the commas and full stops and I put them back in. I can't change a single word, a single syntax, a single punctuation mark, and then I know that it's ready. It's ready.
So in other words, if I may sum up, that in writing, whether it's short stories or otherwise, there is no instant gratification.
There isn't.
And it continues and continues and continues. And Suzanne and Wang, you agree with me. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, we come to the end of the session. The question is, the floor is open for question. Sir, you may please ask your question now. Could you give, is there a microphone for him? Gentleman here. Please specify who the question is for. If you want to introduce yourself, that would be nice. And we'll take a couple of quick questions because we have to be on time for the next session.
Hello. Thank you very much, Zafar. After listening to you, I am working in the film area for the last 52 years. I had 29 books on cinema. I am the oldest film critic scholar in India right now. I have got a little, 1 or 2 lines to give you. What is a short story? Tagore gave a short description of it. It's like, Hoiyao Hoilanu Shesh. It is in Bengali, which ends but really doesn't end. That's the definition of a short story. Number 1. Number 2, when it's nearly 55 years back, I was in the University of Calcutta in the language and English and linguistics part. I tell you that we saw in I.A. Richards, the short story is nothing but a pocket novel. Pocket novel. This was told to us by Anderson, then he was a teacher in the Calcutta University. And third one is that, which I got from T.S. Eliot's Sacred Wood. You have mentioned, Zafar, that consuming books, no, it's enjoyment of book. That's my correction to you, that's all.
So any question, or just an observation?
I wanted to know.
Okay.
Wanted you to know what Tagore has said.
So you had an observation.
It is single graph.
Right.
It doesn't come down. Then it becomes.
Yeah, the lady there. Please,
Thank
can you take the mic there?
Thank you, sir, for your
Thank you.
for sharing
Thank you very
that
much.
knowledge with us.
We'll spare you that.
Thank you for a wow. Thank you for a lovely, absolutely fascinating discussion. And I've been working on women's rights for about 26 years now. I love to read. I'm a consumer. And one thing that I wanted to understand from all of you is that when you're writing a short story, are you tempted to go into the luxury that a longer story or a novel has, the spread of a longer story? And if you have to sacrifice certain places, does it break your heart? And what are the parameters you use to sacrifice certain parts?
I'll ask Suzanne and Ryan to respond to that as writers.
Okay, so first of all, I have a hard time writing, so it's easier for me to write short than write long. So if I ever felt compelled to extend a short story into a novel, I would be happy, I guess. But if I have to cut something that I think is really special, that I really like, I would just put it in another file. I would cut it and paste it in a separate file, and maybe I can use it later, like as in another story or as inspiration for something. So I never really kill my darlings, as they say. So I just put them aside.
Wonderful. Never kill your darlings.
Yeah, same here. I have a file called like Ideas Bank. So any idea goes in there. Anything that gets cut out, it goes in there, and it can be used as a different story.
So do you all actually, with experiences of travel and all, pick up these and just keep filing away?
Yeah.
Zafar and Monideepa, any quick, short responses to her? Because you're writers as well, so.
Yeah, I mean, if I can, I used to have a diary where I would write down the ideas, and but I don't unless I'm writing a novel and there is a chapter I've written which I like very much, but it doesn't belong to the book. Maybe I'll file away because of computers is so easy these days, right? It's not like writing by hand or anything, so you can still file it away and you can use that material sometimes. Sometimes I look back, I go back to my diaries which were there like 10 years ago when cleaning up the house. Suddenly find diaries, scraps of paper. Hey, this was a nice idea, but then you look at it, oh, I don't want to do it. Or maybe this is still workable, So we keep all those things with us. We
Okay,
don't throw them
next
away.
question, yeah. The ladies there, the two ladies, we'll come back. We'll come back in a minute. At the back, there are two ladies there. We'll quickly do that and then we'll come in front.
Good afternoon. My question is for Monideepa and Zafar. So you said you received around 350 entries from across nations. So I just want to know, how do basic human emotions vary across countries? Are they a function of your milieu or your culture, or are they similar across countries?
I'll take that. I'd say the basic humanity is very much the same. That's what I understood while reading all these stories from different cultures. And we have 11 countries represented in the collection. I'd say it's like, I'm wearing a sari and Suzanne and Wang here, they're wearing different dresses. But at heart, we are so similar. When we just met here in Kolkata, we didn't meet before. But yes, we have a lot in common, so I guess that applies to your question as well. The humanity is the same. It's only the superficial trappings, maybe the cultural, differences.
Yeah, we'll move to the next question because there are a couple of hands. So I would like to.
Good afternoon. My question is, as because we have short
Ma'am, would you
time-
hold your mic closer? Yeah.
As because we have so less time, means we are very busy in our lifestyle. So short story is helping nowadays to set a trend.
So the question is, because of paucity of time, does short stories help set a trend?
Yes. Is it trending?
Is it trendy? Zafar, you want
Is it
to?
trendy? I don't know. I mean, mainstream publishers still don't think that it is trending. One reason is probably what is happening now is anything literary. Mainstream publishers are not willing to support it, except for certain writers who have already made their names. So today, a literary writer who wants to write short stories and get it published by all the big five presses, they'll have to go through a lot of hoops. Even the agents, right? They advise you that, oh, this will not sell, and etc. So this discourages them. And writers, especially when you are starting out, right? What is your goal? Your goal is to get at least 2-3 books out, right? Get your name out there, find some readers, etc. And once you are discouraged, what will you do? Oh, this doesn't work, so maybe I'll work on novels. So this automatically feeds into that system, in the vicious circle. And in Kitab, we are trying to break that circle. I say, okay, we'll take our losses, we'll take risks, but we'll do this. We'll see how far it goes.
Easier?
Yeah.
Okay, please do that. Yeah. Yeah, please do that. Before the next question, Monideepa, please go ahead.
Okay, we'll ask Srinjoy Chakravarti to stand up. He's one of the contributors to
Srinjoy?
this collection.
Thank you very
In the
much for
collection.
being here. Give him a big hand, please.
And he's from your city.
Yeah.
Got a beautiful story in the collection.
Yeah, in fact, we have two contributors from Kolkata, right?
Yes, yes.
Another one is Shoma Chatterjee. She could not be here.
Okay.
And yeah, so.
Okay, quick question. So,
Yes,
and then
sir.
would you pass on the mic to the lady behind
Yes,
you?
I'll speak. First of all, I thank all of you for presenting this session and very good stance of Kitab. My question is very technical. Just as the previous question, see, we can make the terminologies as novels, novelettes, short stories, okay. But now, standing in 2018, the time is running so fast. We have the social media, we have many attributes in life, okay. So, a few years back in Calcutta Book Fair, there was a terminology of a specific genre of writing called free writing, okay. So, and that also justifies the time. Means you can't hold a concept by a short story or a novel or a novelette, anything. So are you supporting this concept of free writing, or are you thinking about to publish some material of free writing? Because we have gone through Kafka. Okay, so Kafka's writing are still today we can denote them as
So
free
your
writing.
question, I'm sorry, I'm
Yes,
going to
the
interrupt because of paucity of time.
Yes.
Would they encourage free writing, which is even a shorter
and
form?
how they think about free writing? This
Would-
is the question. Thank you.
Zafar, Monideepa, want to
Well,
take that?
yeah, thanks for the question. Free writing, I mean, we don't think in terms of free writing. Like you said, the categories are still fiction and non-fiction and biography and short stories and all that, right? Because if I categorize something as free writing, ultimately the book will go to bookstore. You go to Amazon or Kindle. Do you see any category for free writing? I doubt it is not there. So how do you slot your book? Even if we do that, right, the bookstore owners wouldn't know where to keep the book. So because of that, we are still in the same, familiar categories and structures. So I hope that answers your question. And thanks for your kind appreciation.
Yeah, the lady there. Ma'am, sit down. Please sit down.
No, it's okay. Thank you very much for finally coming to me. I would like a little time from the anchor person. It's been a wonderful interview and session to pay heed. And I have actually one little question to all the writers, but but the context is of my question is that I have been researching these writers for a long time. I'm a voracious reader of fiction and short fiction. And I've done my work on Shashi Deshpande, Anita Desai, and everybody. And I know these writers using different techniques like stream of consciousness, psychological novels, such stories, and also magic realism and absurdism. And there are many writers from which you are getting influenced, you know. There's no end, starting from Thomas Mann and ending with probably John Steinbeck in America, okay? And I want to know that when you are writing, what is the context you love to see? Because all the previous writers, they have been epochal. They have tried to put up and basically lay focus on the changing traditions, grammar, context, and syntax of the time. Are you also doing the same? When you are writing, sitting in Japan, are you thinking of the technology and what is the effect of it on women vis-a-vis the society and family? The same for Phing. What is the position of the women to this world on the diasporical level? Same to Zafar, okay? And also Monideepa, because I've been I have worked on Shashi Deshpande, and the short story writers like Shashi Deshpande and Chitra Banerjee Divakaruni, like the arranged marriage, where the red symbol has been signified to be the woman's distress and suppression that she goes through, sexual and other suppressions all through her life. So how do you manage to focus on all these, in this
if at all they want to. Yeah.
Yes.
So quick answers because, yeah, we are.
I'll say if at all they want to. Sometimes you may not focus on an issue or a woman. It just may be your experience of sorrow at losing a loved one or losing something that you very much wanted. So it is about life, as Phing said the other day. She said it's about stuff. You know, life happens all around you. So the inspiration is everywhere.
The human condition.
Yeah, we don't limit ourselves that way to any particular theory. I don't. I do take it. We do like to read a lot. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. Great question. Thanks for asking that. I'll talk about inspirations, right? Of course, we're inspired by so many writers. There is Manto, there is Kafka, Tagore, James Joyce, right? So many, right? Hemingway, Carver, Cheever, so many writers. We're all inspired by them. They are the gurus, the masters, right? When I said when you write a story and you look back at it and you think, does it match their level? Is it something close to that? The dust of their feet, is it even closer there? And my ambition is, if I'm able to write even one story of that level, my life is fulfilled, So that's where I'm going. I'll give you an example of one of my stories, which is called Kafka in Ajodhya. I know how I'm interested in stories of Kafka. So Kafka is dead, right? But when the Ajodhya judgment happens in Allahabad court, High Court, I show that he has come from Germany to India and he's living in a hotel with his pet, right? And there's a local a clothes seller who is his pen friend, and they're staying together and then having conversation. Then they go on the ghats of the river over there, and there are a lot of sadhus, and what they observe, what they see, and the whole kind of absurdity of the situation, because people fighting over a structure for different reasons, and then he talks about what happened in Germany, and how Germans now regret about what they did to the Jews, etc., etc. So that's how I'm bringing my influences into today's reading, what's happening today, and how I respond to it as a writer, as a journalist, right? So a lot of elements, so different writers are different. So I have been a journalist, so I have those instincts as well. And I love literature, so I bring those elements as well. And a different kind of writing happens, which I'm sure is different for probably Phing or Moni or Suzanne, which they can talk about. Hope that answers your question.
Yeah, we will have to, I think, close the session because we have a paucity of time. But as the moderator, I'm taking a liberty because it's wonderful to know that Srinjoy, you're with us. You're one of the 32 out of the 350 who made it to this. So ladies and gentlemen, from Bengal, from Kolkata, Srinjoy, though you're not part of the panel, please give him a mic. Srinjoy, would you please share your story with the audience and what it was and what motivated you to write? I think we have to include you, and I'm making that exception, though you are not formally part of the panel. Please stand up and address. You want to come up? Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for a kind invitation.
The Skeleton Lock is your story.
Lock.
Yeah.
I like to think of it as a story that is in between a poem and a short story. Not really a short story in the true sense of the term. As Suzanne said, it's more like a fable. But perhaps you'd like to read it and find it out for yourself.
Yeah.
It was originally published in a university journal, an online university journal in the US, named Of Course. I think the name of the journal indicates what kind of stories it takes. Of course.
Of course. Okay.
So I sent it to them and they liked it. Monideepa, they liked it very much. Thank you for choosing it. And I think this is the kind of story we should read in the future. It's different from the mainstream publications, and it's not a short story in the true sense of the term. It's compact, but it opens up horizons. That's all I'd like to say.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, a big hand for Srinjoy. And I think on that note, we shall end this wonderful session on the best Asian short stories. Thank you very much. Yeah, the books are available at the Crossword Bookstore, and the authors are here to sign it, and the publishers are here to sign them for you. Thank you very much, Zafar. Thank you, thank you, Suzanne, and thank you, Monideepa. And thank you to the wonderful audience.
Thank you so much.
Thank you
and
very
thanks
much.
to you as well for your great moderation.